big country like China saying, right, we are going to, because not just that China put the firewall there, knowing that the internet is not neutral. I mean, that was at the end of the day, the mistake that some of us made is to think this is a nice neutral place where we can have our counter-hegemonic voices heard. And in reality, it was never neutral. And again, when you do a bit of research, I mean, the funding to actually create the internet is connected to the United States military. Like, don't be shocked about the fact that it's not neutral. That was our own kind of misgivings. So, but not only did China put up the wall, which was a requirement, but it also then developed its own capacity. It's not like there's no social media in China. It has its own platforms. It has its alternatives that are in some cases better and more kind of user-friendly than the kind of Western alternatives. But China was able to do that because it's a big country. So in addition to the challenge here, I mean, I was in Lesotho a few weeks ago. Lesotho's population is 2.4 million people. I mean, I'm pretty sure that there are towns in China that are bigger than this entire country. It's hard for a country that size to follow this example. So I think we have this problem. Speaking for the kind of African experience, I think we have two problems. One is this one. And really, I think it cannot be solved without doing a similar thing. You have to create your independence. You have to force for your own sovereignty around this. And you can only do that by drawing a line in the sand and saying, listen, we're not going to allow interests that are counter to the interests of our people to become the kind of hegemonic voices in our society. That's, I think, and you can only do that by using this firewall. But you cannot do that one country at a time in the African context. I mean, we have more than 50 countries. Really, this has to be done at an African level. So when we talk about Pan-Africanism and African unity, this is one of the ways in which that has to happen. You cannot have a kind of alternative, like a WeChat for every single African country. I think we need to come together and say, right, we're going to create an African platform that is not going to be controlled and run by these guys. So that's the problem. And at least if we're going to solve this, it cannot be solved in small pieces at a time. That's the first point. The second point, which I think is important to remember for the African continent, which is a double-edged sword, is the fact that as a result of our continued place as a site for exploitation rather than development, there are actually huge sections of the continent that don't have things like internet and electricity and so forth. I mean, when I go to my friends in Tanzania, if you go to the kind of a rural peasant, the way they get their information is from the radio. They don't have WhatsApp and internet and Facebook and all of these things. So the kind of actual like development of the continent, again, Niger was exporting all of its uranium for almost nothing to France. Every third light bulb in France is powered by uranium from Niger, but 70% of Niger does not have access to electricity. This kind of contradiction has to be overcome. So to some extent, in part as a result of the kind of active underdevelopment of the African continent, some of these challenges are kind of two steps into the future, because we do need electricity and then we need digital sovereignty. And really, I think both of those problems cannot be solved little bits at a time. They have to be solved at a continental level.
Absolutely. I mean, as you were saying that, it is absolutely horrendous how France is still powered by Africa, right?
Yeah.
It's just absolutely ridiculous. And then I also think about China's revolutionary path, the fight against Japanese fascism, and how right now, even in the most rural parts of China, there's electricity, there's internet, it's all
5G.
so connected. Yeah, like I was thinking about the peasants in China who live stream from their farms, every day. And it is so starkly different because of the histories, and I am hopeful that Africa as a continent can also, achieve digital sovereignty as well as internet and electricity. What about you, Mauro? What are your further thoughts?
So I think in this case, especially in this case, we need to look at China, because the interesting thing that I learned with Tromfei, which is from the house, and we make an interview with him, and he told me about the history of why, for instance, Meta wasn't here, because everyone in Latin America thinks, oh, China, because of censorship, doesn't
Yeah.
allow Meta to be here. But actually, what happened was that China said, put some conditions for Zuckerberg to install his business here. And one of them was the data from the Chinese people, it belongs to the Chinese people, so it needs to stay here. And there was some back and forth. I find some images in Mark Zuckerberg Facebook account. I think it was 2016, he was still coming to China, he was jogging in the Tiananmen Square, making, oh, so good to be back in China, like trying to get the business here done.
True, yeah.
But the thing that happened is that he didn't accept the conditions. And the interesting thing, I think, is that China had the knowledge before having the actual capacity, the technology capacity. So this talks about the importance of thinking about in terms of sovereignty in general. So they knew that it was strategic to have these conditions, even though their technology were not that advanced, not that advanced. But this was one of the things that allowed China later to become a powerhouse in all of the aspects of technology. So I think we have serious problems in Latin America with the same issue. For instance, now we talking about AI or storage the data of people. Some governments, for instance, the Brazilian government is making some projects that is called like the cloud, sovereign cloud, something like that. But this sovereign cloud to storage the data from people and everything, they are actually provided by the big companies. So it's already a product from Google. It's called sovereign cloud. So we have a big issue with that, because we are, again, in the same dependence, and we are talking about a very strategic factor. China has decided that the data is a production factor, is the fourth production factor alone in, in the socialism with Chinese characteristics. And we are not seen in the same way, in the same strategic way. And I think if there's any way out, I've been talking to some people from Brazil, some people here from China that are working together to come up with, to discuss about this issue of digital sovereignty. And I definitely think that anything we should do together with China, because China is willing to help in that sense. Of course, China has also the companies, but I think is thinking on from this perspective of win-win, but also of the philosophy of the common prosperity. So I definitely think, and we've been seeing the development, the huge development in the chips industry and the AI industry with some elements of this perspective. For instance, DeepSeek, the fact that it's open source is completely different from the approach that we have in the companies in the US. So definitely, I think if there any way out for us in Latin America is together with China.
Amazing, amazing.